My name is Jake, and for the longest time, I thought my life was the epitome of simplicity and stability. At 45, I had a career in logistics that kept us comfortable, a loving wife named Linda, and two incredible daughters, Sarah and Lizzie, aged 13 and 11. We lived in a cozy suburban neighborhood, our home nestled in a cul-de-sac where everyone knew each other. The kind of place where neighbors waved hello, children played outside until dusk, and the biggest worry was what to cook for the next family barbecue. Linda and I had been married for 15 years, and she had chosen to be a stay-at-home mom after Sarah was born. She was vibrant, always buzzing with energy, and had a knack for making every day feel like an adventure. Our daughters adored her, and from the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Our home was a modest two-story house, painted in a soft blue that complemented the lush garden Linda tended to with passion. The garden was her sanctuary, filled with a riot of colors from various flowers and the gentle hum of bees. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, filled with memories of birthdays, holidays, and countless family gatherings. The living room was the heart of our home, where we spent most evenings watching movies, playing board games, or just talking about our day. I worked hard to provide for my family, often putting in long hours. But I never minded because I believed I was building a secure and happy life for us. Linda was always supportive, taking care of everything at home so I could focus on my job. We had our routines, our shared responsibilities, and our dreams for the future. Little did I know that beneath this veneer of normalcy and contentment, a storm was brewing, one that would shatter the illusion of our perfect life and force me to confront the harsh reality of betrayal. The first inkling that something was amiss came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Linda had gone out to buy some stuff for the home, which was odd since she usually hated running errands. She said she was going with a male friend, Chris, whom I barely knew. When she returned several hours later, she was evasive about the details, and there was a distant look in her eyes that I couldn't quite place. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice other subtle changes. Linda seemed distracted, often lost in thought. Our once passionate love life had dwindled to almost nothing, and her temper was on a hair trigger, snapping at the slightest provocation. It was as if a wall had sprung up between us, one I couldn't understand or penetrate. Despite my rising suspicions, I tried to push the doubts away, convincing myself that it was just a phase, that the pressures of daily life were taking their toll. But deep down, I knew something was very wrong. And so, the seeds of doubt were planted, setting the stage for a discovery that would turn my world upside down. As the days turned into weeks, Linda's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She was often glued to her phone, typing away with a sly smile that vanished the moment she saw me looking. Conversations that were once easy and filled with warmth became stilted and awkward. The laughter that used to fill our home had been replaced by strained silences and forced politeness. One night, while we were watching TV in the living room, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her eyes lighting up briefly before she quickly put it face down on the coffee table. I tried to brush it off, but a gnawing feeling of unease settled in my gut. Who was she texting so late at night, and why did she seem so eager to hide it from me? It wasn't long before my suspicions grew. Linda started dressing differently, more provocatively, with a renewed focus on her appearance. She would spend hours getting ready, even if she was just running errands or meeting a friend. Her explanations for these outings were vague, and she always seemed to be in a rush to leave, as if she couldn't wait to get away from me. One evening, she came home later than usual, her hair tousled and makeup slightly smudged. I asked her where she had been, and she snapped at me, accusing me of being overly controlling and paranoid. "Jake, I need some space. Not everything revolves around you," she said, her voice rising with each word. "Can't you just trust me for once?" Her reaction was overblown, out of proportion to a simple question. It felt like she was deflecting, trying to shift the focus away from herself and onto me. I didn't want to believe that she could be unfaithful, but her defensiveness only fueled my doubts. The final straw came when I noticed a name that kept popping up on her phone. Chris. This was the same Chris she had mentioned before, the old school friend she had reconnected with. The frequency of their messages, often late at night, made my blood run cold. They were clearly more than just friends. One night, when Linda was in the shower, I couldn't resist the urge to check her phone. My hands shook as I unlocked it and opened her messages, What I found confirmed my worst fears. Their conversations were intimate, filled with flirtatious banter and inside jokes. There were also pictures, innocuous on the surface, but the context made them feel like a dagger to the heart. The messages revealed a growing intimacy between them. Chris wrote about how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait to see her again. Linda's replies were just as damning, talking about the special connection they shared and how much she looked forward to their secret meetings. They had been seeing each other for months, right under my nose. I felt a wave of nausea and disbelief. How could she do this to us, to our family? My mind raced with questions, but there were no immediate answers, only a growing sense of betrayal and anger. Confronting her right then felt impossible. I needed time to process what I had just discovered, to think about my next steps. The reality of her infidelity was like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and disoriented. From that moment on, my interactions with Linda were strained and fraught with unspoken tension. Every time she looked at her phone, every time she left the house, my mind screamed with accusations. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship was now shattered, replaced by a simmering resentment and the burning need for answers. The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and silent suffering. I tried to keep things normal for the sake of our daughters, but inside, I was a mess. I knew I had to confront Linda eventually, to force the truth out into the open. But the thought of that confrontation, of hearing her admit to her betrayal, filled me with dread. And so, I waited, gathering my strength and resolve, preparing for the moment when everything would come to light. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I anticipated. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Linda had gone out, leaving me alone with Sarah and Lizzie. They were upstairs playing in their room, and I was trying to distract myself with some work. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Linda and Chris, to the betrayal that had taken root in my marriage. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed concrete proof, something irrefutable that would force Linda to admit the truth. Driven by a mixture of anger and desperation, I decided to search her laptop, which she often left lying around the house. It was a long shot, but I had to try. Her laptop was on the dining room table, and my hands shook as I opened it. The screen came to life, and I navigated to her email, heart pounding in my chest. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There in her sent folder were dozens of emails exchanged between Linda and Chris. Some were casual, filled with lighthearted banter, but others were far more intimate, discussing their feelings for each other and planning their secret rendezvous. I felt a cold, sickening wave of betrayal wash over me as I read their words. It was all there in black and white, the lies, the deceit, the emotional and physical infidelity. They talked about the times they had met, the places they had been, and even joked about how oblivious I was. Each sentence was like a knife to the heart, cutting deeper and deeper. My head spun, and I had to sit down, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. This was it, the undeniable proof of her betrayal. I printed out the most damning emails, knowing I would need them for what was to come. As I sat there trying to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me, I heard the front door open. Linda was home. My heart raced, and my hands clenched into fists as I prepared to confront her. This was it. There was no turning back now. "Jake, I'm back!" she called out, her voice carrying a casual cheeriness that made my blood boil. "What's for dinner?" I stood up, the printed emails clenched in my hand, and walked into the hallway to face her. She looked up, her smile fading as she saw the expression on my face. "We need to talk," I said, my voice shaking with anger. She looked confused, then wary. "About what?" I held up the emails, my hand trembling. "About these." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw genuine fear in them. She quickly masked it with a defiant glare. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Linda," I snapped, throwing the papers onto the table. "I know everything. I know about Chris, about your affair. I've seen the emails, the messages. How long did you think you could keep this up?" Her face paled, and she took a step back, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes at me. "You had no right to go through my things." "No right?" I echoed, incredulous. "You're the one who betrayed me, who betrayed our family. And you're worried about privacy?" Linda's expression hardened. "You were never around, Jake. Always working, always too busy for me. What did you expect?" Her words stung, but they also fueled my anger. Don't you dare try to blame this on me. I worked hard to provide for us, to give us a good life. And this is how you repay me, by sneaking around with another man? She opened her mouth to retort, but I cut her off. I trusted you, Linda. I loved you. And you threw it all away for what? For some fling? Her face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a flicker of remorse. Jake, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did, I said, my voice breaking. It went far enough to destroy everything we had. We stood there in silence, the weight of her betrayal hanging between us like a physical presence. I felt a surge of anger, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The woman I had loved and trusted had turned into a stranger, someone capable of hurting me in ways I never thought possible. Do the girls know? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Linda shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. No, they don't know anything. Good, I said, my voice firm. Because they don't need to be dragged into this. But they will know soon enough, Linda. This isn't something we can hide from them forever. She nodded, wiping away a tear. Jake, please, can we try to work this out? For the girl's sake. I stared at her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Linda. You've broken something that can't be easily fixed. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The confrontation was over, but the real battle was just beginning. How could we ever rebuild our lives after this? The days following my discovery were filled with a tense, unbearable silence. Linda and I barely spoke, each of us lost in our own thoughts and turmoil. The girls sensed the tension but didn't ask questions, their innocent eyes watching us with confusion and concern. I couldn't stand it any longer. I needed to confront Linda properly, to hear her side of the story, and see if there was any way to salvage the wreckage of our marriage. One evening, after we had put the girls to bed, I asked Linda to join me in the living room. She sat down on the sofa, her posture defensive, her eyes wary. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. This was it. No more evasions, no more hiding. It was time to lay everything out in the open. Linda, I need to understand why, I began, my voice trembling. Why did you do it? Was I not enough? Was our life not enough? She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. For a moment I thought she wouldn't answer, but then she looked up, her eyes filled with tears. Jake, it wasn't about you, she said softly. It was about me. I felt lonely, empty. You were always working, always away. I needed something more, something to fill the void. Her words stung, but I forced myself to listen. So you turned to Chris. You thought he could fill that void? Linda nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know it was wrong. I know I hurt you. But he made me feel alive, like I mattered. I hadn't felt that way in a long time. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my anger in check. You mattered to me, Linda. You always mattered, but you threw it all away for some fleeting thrill. She shook her head, sobbing. It wasn't just a thrill, Jake. It was real, but I never meant for it to destroy us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Real? You call betraying your husband and your family real? Linda's sobs grew louder and she buried her face in her hands. I'm sorry, Jake. I'm so sorry. Her apology felt hollow, like a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. Sorry doesn't fix this, Linda. Sorry doesn't erase the lies, the deceit. How can I ever trust you again? She looked up, her eyes pleading. I'll do anything, Jake. Please, just give me a chance to make things right, for the girls, if not for us. The mention of our daughters softened me, but only slightly. I couldn't ignore the depth of her betrayal, the pain she had caused, but for the sake of our children, I had to try. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Linda, I said, my voice raw with emotion, but I'm willing to try, for Sarah and Lizzie. Her face lit up with a glimmer of hope. Thank you, Jake. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust. As we sat there, the weight of the situation bearing down on us, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was faint and fragile, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, We could find a way through this. But then, just as I thought we might be making progress, Linda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face paled. She quickly silenced it, but not before I saw the name on the screen. Chris. My heart sank. You're still talking to him, aren't you? She looked panicked, shaking her head. No, Jake, it's not what you think. He just wanted to check in, to see if I was okay. Check in? I repeated, incredulous. After everything that's happened, you're still in contact with him? Linda's face crumpled, and she reached out to touch my arm. Jake, I swear, it's nothing. I'll block him, delete his number. Just please, give me a chance. I pulled away, feeling a fresh wave of anger and betrayal. How can I believe anything you say? How can I trust you when you're still talking to the man who destroyed our marriage? Her tears fell freely, but I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. The damage was done, and I didn't know if we could ever repair it. That night, I slept in the guest room, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I wanted to believe Linda, to give her a chance to make things right, but the constant reminders of her betrayal, the lies and deceit, made it almost impossible. In the days that followed, Linda tried to prove her commitment to fixing our marriage. She blocked Chris, deleted his number, and promised to focus on our family. But the trust was gone, replaced by a gnawing doubt that refused to be silenced. I watched her closely, looking for any signs of deceit. Every time her phone buzzed, every time she left the house, my heart raced with suspicion. It was no way to live, constantly on edge, waiting for the next betrayal. Our conversations remained tense and stilted, filled with unspoken accusations and lingering resentment. Linda's attempts at reconciliation felt forced, like she was going through the motions rather than genuinely trying to make amends. One evening, after another strained dinner, I decided to confront her one last time. Linda, this isn't working. We're both pretending, but the truth is, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She looked devastated, her eyes brimming with tears. Jake, please. I love you. I don't want to lose our family. I sighed, feeling the weight of the decision bearing down on me. I don't want to lose our family either, Linda. But I can't live like this. We need to figure out what's best for us. And for the girls. Her tears flowed freely, and she nodded. Okay, Jake. We'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. I just want to fix this. I agreed, knowing that it was our last chance. We began attending counseling sessions, hoping to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It was a slow, painful process, filled with raw emotions and difficult conversations. But despite our efforts, the damage was too deep. The constant reminders of her betrayal, the lingering doubts, made it impossible to move forward. After months of trying, we both realized that we couldn't save our marriage. We sat down with the girls, explaining the situation as gently as we could. They cried, begging us to stay together, but we assured them that we would always be there for them, no matter what. The divorce process was long and painful, but eventually it was finalized. Linda and I went our separate ways, trying to rebuild our lives apart from the wreckage of our marriage. In the end, the confrontation had led to the inevitable. The realization that some wounds could never fully heal, and that sometimes, the best thing you can do is to let go and move forward. The divorce might have been finalized, but the anger and betrayal lingered, gnawing at me like an open wound. Linda's betrayal was a constant reminder of how she had shattered our lives, and no amount of therapy or counseling could erase the pain. I wanted to move on, but I also wanted her to feel the same hurt she had inflicted on me. As the weeks turned into months, my thoughts grew darker. I was tired of being the victim, of being the one left to pick up the pieces while Linda seemed to move on without a care. She had destroyed our marriage, and now she was living her life as if nothing had happened. It wasn't fair, and I couldn't let it go. I started to plan my revenge meticulously. I knew I had to be careful, to avoid anything that could backfire on me or hurt our daughters. But Linda had to pay for what she did, and I was determined to make sure she did. I began by gathering information about Chris. I found out where he lived, where he worked, and even where he liked to hang out. It took some time and effort, but I was driven by a burning need for retribution. I needed to make sure that Linda and Chris would never forget the consequences of their actions. One evening, I paid a visit to Chris's workplace. He worked at a high-end restaurant as a manager, a place known for its exclusivity and clientele. I had done my research and knew his schedule well. I arrived just as his shift was ending and waited outside, hidden in the shadows. As he stepped out of the building, I approached him. "Chris?" I called out, my voice calm but firm. He turned, his face going pale as he recognized me. "Jake? What are you doing here?" I took a step closer, keeping my voice low. "We need to talk about Linda." He glanced around nervously, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, Jake, I don't want any trouble. You already caused enough trouble," I interrupted, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You destroyed my marriage. Now you're going to pay for it." Before he could react, I lunged at him, delivering a hard punch to his gut. He doubled over, gasping for breath. "This is for everything you did," I said, my voice shaking with rage. Chris tried to fight back, but I was fueled by months of pent-up anger and betrayal. I landed several more punches, making sure he felt every ounce of the pain he had caused me. Finally, I stopped, leaving him bruised and bloodied on the ground. "Stay away from Linda," I spat, my voice cold. "If I ever see you near her again, it will be worse next time." With that, I walked away, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I knew what I had done was risky, but in that moment, it felt like a necessary release. Chris had to understand that actions had consequences, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. My next target was Linda. I couldn't confront her physically, not with the girls around, but I had other ways to make her life miserable. I knew her weaknesses, her insecurities, and I planned to exploit them to their fullest. I started by spreading rumors about her affair. I told our mutual friends, our neighbors, anyone who would listen. I painted her as the villain, the one who had destroyed our family. It didn't take long for the gossip to spread, and soon Linda found herself ostracized and shunned by the community. She tried to confront me, furious at the damage to her reputation. "How could you do this, Jake?" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "You're ruining my life." "You ruined mine first," I replied coldly. "Now you know how it feels." But I didn't stop there. I hacked into her social media accounts, posting humiliating messages and photos that made her a laughingstock. Her phone was flooded with hateful messages and threats, and she had no idea who was behind it. I also sabotaged her job prospects, sending anonymous emails to potential employers with fabricated stories about her infidelity and unreliability. Every job application she sent out was met with silence or rejection, leaving her frustrated and desperate. My revenge was relentless, and Linda's life quickly unraveled. She lost friends, respect, and any sense of stability. She was a shell of the confident woman she once was, and it brought me a grim satisfaction to see her suffer. One night she showed up at my door, looking broken and defeated. "Jake, please," she begged, her voice hoarse from crying. "I can't take this anymore. I'm sorry for what I did. Please, just stop." I stared at her, feeling a twisted sense of triumph. "Now you know how it feels to have your life destroyed," I said quietly. "Maybe next time, you'll think twice before betraying someone who loved you." With that, I closed the door in her face, leaving her sobbing on the porch. My revenge was complete, but as I walked away, a part of me wondered if it was worth it. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, consumed by anger and a thirst for retribution. The satisfaction of seeing Linda suffer was fleeting, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I realized that while I had punished Linda, I hadn't healed the wounds inside me. Revenge had given me a temporary sense of control, but it hadn't brought me peace. The betrayal still haunted me, and I knew that the only way to truly move on was to let go of the anger and find a way to rebuild my life. As I lay in bed that night, I resolved to focus on healing, for myself and for my daughters. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had to find a way to leave the pain behind and build a future free from the shadows of the past. The weeks after my revenge on Linda were strangely quiet. The storm of emotions had subsided, leaving behind a weary calm. I had hurt Linda, and while it had brought some fleeting satisfaction, it didn't fill the emptiness inside me. My daughters, Sarah and Lizzie, were my anchor, the reason I kept going every day. They were confused by the changes in our lives, but I tried to shield them from the worst of it. One evening, after putting the girls to bed, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Linda standing there, looking haggard and worn. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and she seemed smaller, diminished somehow. It was a far cry from the confident woman I had once known. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. I stepped aside, letting her in. We sat in the living room, the silence between us heavy and oppressive. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew this conversation was long overdue. "I know you hate me," Linda began, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I deserve it. I betrayed you, and I hurt our family. But Jake, I'm begging you, for the sake of the girls, can we find a way to move forward?" I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret etched on her face. For the first time, I felt a pang of empathy. She had made terrible choices, but she was still the mother of my children, and we had shared many good years together. "Linda," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "I don't hate you. I hate what you did, but hating you won't fix anything. We have to find a way to co-parent Sarah and Lizzie, to make sure they know they are loved no matter what." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded. "I know. I've been so focused on my own pain that I forgot about theirs. I want to do better, Jake. I want to be a good mother to them." I sighed, feeling the weight of the past few months pressing down on me. "We can't change what happened, Linda, but we can try to move forward. The girls need both of us, and we need to put their needs first." She wiped her tears away, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Jake. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm grateful." I looked at her, seeing the woman I had once loved and the stranger she had become. "This doesn't mean I forgive you, Linda. That will take time if it ever happens. But for the sake of our daughters, I'm willing to try." She nodded, understanding the unspoken terms. We talked for a while longer, discussing how we would handle custody and visitation, how we would communicate about the girls' needs and activities. It was a difficult conversation, but it was necessary. We had to find a way to coexist for the sake of our children. As she stood to leave, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and sorrow. "Jake, I'm truly sorry. I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I promise to do everything I can to be a better mother and to support you in any way I can." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure. "I hope you do, Linda. For their sake." She left, and I sat in the quiet house, reflecting on our conversation. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation I had imagined, but it was a step towards healing. We were no longer husband and wife, but we were still parents, and that bond would never be broken. The next few days were a tentative truce. Linda and I communicated more openly about the girls, and slowly, a fragile co-parenting relationship began to form. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of tension, but we were both committed to making it work. One evening, as I was tucking Sarah into bed, she looked up at me with wide, questioning eyes. "Dad, are you and Mom going to be okay?" I smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're going to be okay, sweetheart. We're both here for you and Lizzie, and that's what matters." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, Sarah. Always." As I left her room, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the path to healing. It wouldn't be easy, and the scars of Linda's betrayal would always be there, but we were moving forward, one step at a time. The last conversation with Linda had been a turning point. It marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. We were no longer the couple we once were, but we were still a family, and that was something worth fighting for. The divorce trial was a stark reminder of how far we had fallen from the life we once knew. The courtroom was cold and impersonal, a far cry from the warmth of our home. Linda and I sat on opposite sides, our lawyers between us, as we prepared to finalize the end of our marriage. The judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, called the court to order. I glanced at Linda, who looked tired and defeated. Her once vibrant spirit seemed extinguished, and for a moment, I felt a pang of regret. But then I reminded myself of why we were here, and the anger and betrayal resurfaced. Our lawyers presented our case, detailing the terms of the divorce agreement. The primary focus was on custody of Sarah and Lizzie, as well as the division of our assets. We had agreed to joint custody, recognizing the importance of both parents in the girls' lives, but the logistics needed to be ironed out. Linda's lawyer began, outlining her requests for visitation and support. She wanted to maintain a significant role in the girls' lives, despite the mistakes she had made. I listened, my jaw clenched, as she spoke about her desire to be a better mother and to make amends for her actions. When it was my lawyer's turn, he presented our side with precision and clarity. We emphasized the stability I could provide, the support system of my family, and the steps I had taken to ensure the girls' well-being. I wasn't trying to paint Linda as a villain, but I wanted the court to understand the impact of her betrayal on our family. The judge listened carefully, occasionally asking questions to clarify certain points. Her expression was neutral, giving nothing away about her thoughts or inclinations. When both sides had finished, she called for a short recess to review the evidence and make her decision. As we waited, the tension in the room was palpable. Linda avoided my gaze, staring down at her hands. I felt a mix of anger and pity, wishing things could have been different, but knowing they couldn't be. Finally, the judge returned and called the court to order. She addressed us with a calm, authoritative voice. "I have reviewed the evidence and considered the arguments from both sides. This is a difficult case, and my primary concern is the welfare of the children." She paused, looking directly at us. "Joint custody is appropriate in this situation, given that both parents are committed to the well-being of Sarah and Lizzie. However, I have made some specific determinations regarding visitation and support." She outlined the terms clearly. Linda would have the girls every other weekend and one evening a week, allowing her to maintain a consistent presence in their lives. I would have primary custody, ensuring stability and continuity in their daily routine. Financial support would be shared, with Linda contributing to the girls' expenses. The judge's decision was fair, balancing our responsibilities and the needs of our daughters, but it still felt like a hollow victory. The marriage we had built, the life we had shared, was now reduced to legal terms and schedules. After the trial, we gathered our things in silence. Linda approached me, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Thank you, Jake," she said quietly, "for agreeing to joint custody. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise I'll do my best for the girls." I nodded, my emotions a tangled mess. "It's not about what we deserve, Linda. It's about what's best for Sarah and Lizzie." She gave a small, sad smile. "You're right, and I'll do everything I can to make it right." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the courtroom feeling a strange sense of closure. The trial was over, but the real work of rebuilding our lives was just beginning. The next few months were a blur of adjustment and new routines. Sarah and Lizzie adapted surprisingly well to the changes, their resilience a constant source of inspiration for me. They spent weekends with Linda, who seemed genuinely committed to being a better mother. I focused on creating a stable, loving environment for them, ensuring they felt secure despite the upheaval. Linda and I communicated regularly about the girls, keeping our interactions civil and focused on their needs. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and unresolved emotions, but we managed. The wounds of betrayal were still there, but we were learning to coexist for the sake of our children. One evening, as I was helping Lizzie with her homework, she looked up at me with a serious expression. "Dad, are you and Mom friends now?" I paused, considering my response. "We're not friends like we used to be, Lizzie, but we're working together to make sure you and Sarah are happy and loved." She nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad. I don't want you and Mom to fight anymore." I smiled, ruffling her hair. "We don't want that either, sweetheart." As the months passed, the pain of the past began to fade, replaced by a new sense of normalcy. I found solace in the routines of daily life, in the laughter of my daughters, and in the support of my friends and family. The trial had been a turning point, a necessary step towards healing and moving forward. Linda and I were no longer partners, but we were co-parents, united in our love for Sarah and Lizzie. It wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was a life we could build on, a life where we could find new beginnings, even in the shadow of betrayal. And so, we moved forward one day at a time, finding our way through the darkness and into the light. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. It was a start. The divorce trial had been a turning point, marking the end of one chapter and the tentative beginning of another. As the months turned into a year, I focused on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. The house, once filled with tension and heartbreak, gradually became a sanctuary of healing and new beginnings. Sarah and Lizzie were my anchors, their laughter and resilience a constant reminder of why I needed to move forward. We created new routines and traditions, filling our days with activities and moments that brought us closer. I made sure our home was a place of love and stability, a refuge from the turmoil of the past. Linda and I managed to find a balance in our co-parenting. We communicated effectively about the girls, keeping our interactions civil and focused on their needs. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when the scars of our past threatened to reopen, but we managed. The girls' happiness and well-being remained our top priority. One weekend, while the girls were with Linda, I decided to take a solo hike. It was something I hadn't done in years, and I felt a strong need to reconnect with myself and nature. The trail was quiet, the air crisp and fresh, and as I walked, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had been through. The betrayal, the anger, the revenge, all of it seemed distant now, like shadows of a life I no longer lived. I realized that holding on to that pain was only hurting me, and it was time to truly let go. Forgiveness wasn't about condoning what Linda had done. It was about freeing myself from the weight of it. As I reached the summit, the view took my breath away. The expansive landscape stretched out before me, a tapestry of greens and blues that felt both vast and intimate. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. I was ready to move forward, to embrace the future with an open heart. Back in town, I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I joined a local photography club, rediscovering a passion that had lain dormant for years. The simple act of capturing moments through my lens became a form of therapy, a way to see the world with fresh eyes. One evening at a gallery event, I met Emma. She was an artist, her work vibrant and full of life. We struck up a conversation about photography and art, and there was an immediate connection. Emma was kind, intelligent, and had a warmth that drew me in. We exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks, we spent more time together, exploring the town, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's company. With Emma, things felt different. There was no rush, no pressure to define what we were. We simply enjoyed being together, letting our relationship develop naturally. She understood my past, the wounds I was still healing from, and she never pushed me to move faster than I was ready. One sunny afternoon, as we sat by the lake, watching the ducks glide across the water, Emma turned to me with a gentle smile. "Jake, I know you've been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here, for whatever you need. There's no rush. Just know that you have someone who cares about you." Her words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Emma. Your patience means more to me than you know." Our relationship blossomed, not as a replacement for what I had lost, but as a new beginning. With Emma, I found a sense of joy and hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. She became a part of my life, and slowly, we introduced her to Sarah and Lizzie. The girls took to her immediately, their laughter and smiles a testament to the positive influence she had on us all. As time went on, I began to see the future with renewed clarity. The pain of the past had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was stronger, more resilient, and more aware of what truly mattered. Life was about the moments of connection, the love we shared with those around us, and the ability to find beauty even in the midst of hardship. One evening, as I tucked the girls into bed, Sarah looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, do you think things will always be like this?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I do know that we'll always have each other, no matter what." She nodded, a contented smile spreading across her face. "I like that." As I left their room, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey I had been on. It hadn't been easy, but it had brought me to a place of peace and fulfillment. I had learned to let go of the past, to forgive, and to embrace the possibilities of the future. With Emma by my side and my daughters as my guiding light, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. Life was full of unexpected turns, but it was also full of hope and new beginnings. And so, I stepped into my new life, ready to write the next chapter with an open heart and a renewed spirit. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to embrace it, to find joy in the journey, and to create a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities.